Ethan sat in the pilot seat of his small spacecraft, his hands moving expertly over the controls. The stars outside looked like tiny diamonds against the blackness of space. He was on a routine mission, traveling through uncharted space to map out new regions. As a solo explorer, his life was lonely, but he enjoyed the peace and quiet of space. He had always loved the thrill of discovering new places, even if he didn't always find life or danger along the way. Today, however, things were different. His ship's alert system beeped loudly, pulling him from his thoughts. Ethan frowned and looked at the blinking red light on his dashboard. It was an emergency distress signal. The message was weak and filled with static, but it was clear enough to understand. Someone or something needed help. Without a second thought, Ethan altered his course, steering the ship toward the source of the signal. The coordinates led him to a small, desolate planet. It was covered in dust and seemed abandoned. The planet's atmosphere was thin, and there was little sign of life. As his ship descended, he could see ruins scattered across. The landscape and ancient buildings and structures that once must have been home to some advanced civilization, now they were broken and forgotten, just like the planet itself. When the ship touched down, Ethan quickly checked his supplies. He didn't know what kind of help was needed, but he was always prepared. He grabbed his equipment, made sure his blaster was charged, and stepped out of the airlock. The air was dry and smelled faintly of something metallic, as if the planet had once been a thriving hub of activity, but had long since been abandoned. Ethan scanned the area, his eyes searching for signs of life. He wasn't expecting to find anything, but he was wrong. In the distance, near the ruins of what seemed to be an old marketplace, he spotted movement. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. He couldn't tell what it was from this far away, but it looked like a person, no, two people. He quickly made his way toward them, his boots kicking up the dust with each step. As he got closer, he could see them clearly. There was a girl not more than 18, standing beside an older woman. The girl's features were alien, unlike anything Ethan had ever seen before. Her skin was a pale blue, almost translucent. In the weak sunlight, her hair was long and dark, flowing down her back like a river of silk. The older woman, who looked tired and worn, had the same unusual skin color and similar features. The girl's eyes locked with Ethan's, and for a moment they both stood still, just staring at each other. Then the girl took a step forward, her expression full of both fear and hope. "Please, human," she said, her voice soft and shaky. "We need shelter, please, my mother and I. We have nowhere else to go." Ethan was taken aback. He hadn't expected to find anyone here, let alone aliens. His first instinct was to back away and reconsider, but there was something in the girl's eyes that made him hesitate. It wasn't just fear, it was desperation. She was not just asking for shelter. She was pleading for help. Ethan cleared his throat, trying to keep his voice calm. "What happened to you?" he asked. "Who are you?" The girl glanced at the older woman, who gave a slight nod. She then looked back at Ethan, her eyes full of sadness. "I am Zara, and this is my mother Selen. We were once part of a great empire, but we were enslaved, taken by another race, forced to work, to serve. For years, we lived under their control." Ethan's mind raced. Slavery. It was hard to believe such things existed in the galaxy. But he knew there were cruel civilizations out there. He had heard rumors of such things. He had never thought he would actually encounter someone who had lived through it. "Why are you here?" he asked, his voice softening. "How did you end up on this planet?" Zara's eyes filled. "With tears, we escaped, we managed to flee. But our ship was damaged in the process. We've been hiding here, waiting for help, but no one has come. Please, we don't want to go back. Can't. The Empire will find us, and they will make us pay for running away." Selen, the older woman, spoke for the first time. Her voice was steady, but there was a deep sadness in it. "My daughter can clean, cook, and obey. We just need shelter. We're not asking for much, just a safe place to stay." Ethan felt a tight knot form in his stomach. The words the woman spoke were harsh, but he could tell they weren't meant as insults. They were simply the truth of their lives. Zara and Selen had been broken by their experiences, reduced to offering themselves in exchange for safety. Ethan paused, thinking for a moment. The situation was complicated. He didn't know these people. He didn't know if he could trust them, but something in him couldn't ignore their plea. He had seen people in need before, but this was different. These weren't just strangers asking for a place to stay. These were people who had suffered unimaginable things. I can help you, Ethan said finally, his voice firm. But I can't promise much. I'm just one person, and I'm far from home. The ship is small, and we can't afford to draw attention. Zara nodded quickly, her face lighting up with hope. Thank you, human. Thank you for not turning us away. Ethan hesitated. But why? Why offer to clean, cook, and obey? You don't need to do that. You're free now. You're not slaves anymore. Zara's eyes dropped to the ground. We don't know how to be anything else. It's all we've known. But if we can help in any way, we will. We just need to survive. Ethan's heart softened. He understood now. They weren't just asking for shelter. They were offering what little they had left, what they knew. Zara and Selen had been so broken by their experiences that they couldn't imagine being anything else but servants. They were trying to hold on to some semblance of purpose, even if it was only through the things they had been forced to do in the past. I'll take you aboard, Ethan said, his voice kind. But you don't have to do anything. Just stay safe. Rest. You've been through enough. Zara and Selen looked at each other, then back at Ethan, their faces full of gratitude. Thank you, Zara, whispered again. You don't know what this means to us. Ethan nodded, leading them toward his ship. As they walked, he couldn't help but wonder what kind of galaxy had left such scars on these two. What kind of empire would enslave people like this? And why did he feel like he was about to get tangled up in something much bigger than a simple rescue mission? The soft hum of the ship's engines was a comfort to Ethan as he piloted his small craft back into space. The stars ahead were distant, yet they seemed closer than they had moments ago. Zara and Selen were now aboard, seated quietly in the small cargo hold. They had been given a room, though it was little more than a small space with a bed and a few basic comforts. Still, to Zara and Selen, it was a luxury. The two of them had been living in constant fear and struggle for years. To them, this was a taste of freedom. Ethan couldn't shake the image of Zara's face when she first spoke to him. The fear in her eyes, the way her voice trembled, it had struck something deep inside him. He had been alone for so long, traveling across the galaxy without much thought for anyone but himself. Now, here he was, with two strangers who had clearly suffered unimaginable things. They had no place to go, no real family left, except each other, as they flew through the cold void of space. Ethan tried to strike up a conversation with Zara. He needed to know more about her and Selen. What had happened to them? Why were they running, Zara? Ethan began cautiously, trying to keep his tone gentle. You said you were once part of a great empire. Can you tell me more about it? Zara looked up from where she sat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. She had been staring out the window, lost in thought. At the mention of the empire, her eyes grew distant. She hesitated for a moment before speaking. It was called the Malayan Empire, Zara said softly. We were once powerful, proud, and respected throughout the galaxy. Our people were advanced in science, technology, and diplomacy. We had everything: wealth, knowledge, influence. She paused, and Ethan could see the pain in her eyes. But we were weak in other ways. We trusted the wrong people. Ethan listened carefully. He had heard of powerful empires falling before, but hearing Zara speak about it made it seem so much more real. Who did you trust? He asked. Zara bit her lip. The Thraxians, she said bitterly. They were supposed to be our allies. We welcomed them into our empire. But instead of helping us, they betrayed us. They manipulated us, destroyed us from the inside. They turned our leaders against us, and one by one, they took our worlds, my people. We were sold into slavery. We became their property, and they used us. Ethan's heart sank. He'd been prepared for a sad story, but nothing could have prepared him for the depth of Zara's pain. That's horrible, he said, his voice thick with sympathy. But how did you escape? How did you end up on that planet? Zara's hand shook as she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. We were lucky, she whispered. My mother, Selen, she used to be one of the high-ranking officials in our empire. She had influence. She knew things. She managed to escape their grasp, and we fled. But the Thraxians never stop hunting us. They'll find us eventually. I know it. Ethan was silent for a moment. He had no idea how to respond. The story was more than just one of survival. It was a tale of betrayal, loss, and endless struggle. Zara wasn't just a girl asking for help. She was someone whose entire life had been turned upside down by the cruelty of a galaxy that had refused to care. "What happened to your home planet?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Zara's gaze grew distant again. "It's gone. Our capital was destroyed in the first attack. They wiped it out completely. When they destroyed the heart of our empire, they broke our spirit. After that, there was nothing left to fight for. We were scattered, captured, and sold to other races. I never thought I would see another planet again." Ethan's eyes softened. "But you're free now," he said, trying to comfort her. "You're safe, and I'll make sure you stay safe." Zara met his gaze, her eyes filled with a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "I don't know what to do now," she admitted. "We don't know how to live in this galaxy anymore. All we know is how to serve, how to obey. That's all we've done for years." Ethan frowned. "You don't have to live like that anymore. You're free. You can choose what you want to do." Zara shook her head, her face tightening with frustration. "You don't understand. It's not that simple. After everything we've been through, all we know is how to survive. I don't know how to be anything else. And neither does my mother." Ethan paused. He could see how deep the scars of slavery ran. Zara and her mother weren't just physically free, they were mentally and emotionally trapped in the past. They had no idea how to move forward or what freedom truly meant. "I understand," Ethan said slowly. "It's going to take time, but I'll help you, both of you. You don't have to stay like this. You can learn to live again." Zara gave him a small, grateful smile. "Thank you," she whispered. "I don't know what to say." Ethan smiled back. "You don't have to say anything. Just rest. For now, you're safe." As the days passed, Ethan found himself becoming more and more invested in Zara and her mother's well-being. He couldn't explain it, but something about them, about their pain, their resilience, had struck a chord in him. He wanted to protect them, help them rebuild, and give them a chance. At a new life, he showed Zara and Selen the basics of his ship, giving them small tasks to help pass the time. At first, they were hesitant. They seemed unsure of what to do, as if they expected to be punished for taking up space or using resources. But slowly, as they began to adjust to the simple life on board, they started to open up. Zara began to ask Ethan about his life, his experiences. She was curious about Earth, about the humans who had once been considered insignificant in the galaxy. She had heard stories, but she had never met a human before. Ethan found himself sharing more than he had ever planned to. He told her about his life as a solo explorer, the places he had seen, and the people he had met along the way. It wasn't much, but it was the truth. For the first time in a long while, Ethan felt like he wasn't alone. But even as they shared stories and began to form a bond, Ethan knew that their troubles were far from over. The Thraxians were out there, searching for them. Couldn't let his guard down. Couldn't allow himself to believe that the danger had passed. For now, though, Ethan allowed himself to enjoy the peace. He had 2 people under his care. Now, they were survivors, and they had just begun to realize that they had the chance to start over. But that was the thing about freedom. It was never easy. And Ethan would soon find that protecting Zara and Selen would be harder than anything he had ever faced before. The days aboard the ship had been peaceful, almost too peaceful. Ethan had never expected to find such calm after agreeing to help Zara and her mother. But now, as the stars blurred outside the ship's window, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming, a storm they weren't ready for. Zara and Selen had slowly adjusted to life aboard the ship, becoming familiar with the routine of daily activities. They had learned to make themselves useful in small ways, helping Ethan with tasks and chores that kept the ship running smoothly. Zara had even begun to teach Ethan a little about her homeworld, telling him about the Malian Empire and the history of her people. They shared stories, laughter, and sometimes even silence, comforting. Quiet peace that allowed them to forget the horrors they had left behind. But no matter how hard they tried to push the past away, it followed them like a shadow. One afternoon, as Ethan sat at the ship's controls, a sudden alert flashed across the screen. The small ship's security system had detected something big. Ethan's eyes widened as he quickly scanned the data. It was an entire fleet of ships heading straight for their location. "Zara," Ethan called, his voice filled with urgency. Zara, who had been working in the kitchen, immediately rushed to his side. She looked at the screen, her face going pale as she recognized the ships. The colors and markings were unmistakable. The Thraxians. She whispered, her voice shaking with fear. Ethan turned to look at her. "Who are they? What do they want?" Zara took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had known this day would come. She had always known that the Thraxians would hunt them down. "They were the ones who destroyed my home. They were the ones who enslaved us," she said, her voice filled with dread. "They never stopped chasing us. They'll do anything to bring us back." Ethan's heart pounded in his chest. He had suspected that they might run into trouble, but this was worse than he had imagined. A fleet of warships designed for destruction was on its way. They were headed straight for them. "What can we do?" Ethan asked, his voice urgent as he began to work the controls. Zara didn't hesitate. She knew what needed to be done. "We have to get out of here now. They'll destroy the ship if they catch us. They won't show mercy." Ethan looked out the window. The fleet was growing closer with each passing second, and their large ships filled the screen with an overwhelming presence. He had no choice. He had to act fast. "Can you help me?" he asked. "Do you know how to hide or avoid them?" Zara nodded quickly. "Yes, I know their tactics. We need to use the nebula nearby to hide. It's dense, and the ships will have trouble tracking us there." Without wasting another moment, Ethan turned the ship toward the distant nebula, hoping it was close enough. He trusted Zara's knowledge, but there was no time to be sure. The Thraxians were relentless, and they had never left a trail of survivors. He could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on him as he pushed the throttle, sending the ship hurtling toward the dense cloud of gas and dust. As the ship raced toward the nebula, Zara moved quickly to the ship's secondary controls, helping Ethan make adjustments. Her hands moved with surprising skill, as if she had done this many times before. Ethan realized she must have learned about starships during her time in the Malian Empire. Even though she had been enslaved, Zara was still intelligent and resourceful. "Do you think we can outrun them?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his voice steady. Zara glanced at him, her face set in determination. "I don't know, but we'll try. If we can reach the nebula, they might not be able to track us. The cloud will disrupt their sensors, but we can't stay too long." The Thraxian fleet was closing in quickly. Ethan could hear the hum of their engines vibrating through the ship, the tension rising with each passing moment. As they entered the outer edge of the nebula, Ethan felt a sense of relief, but only for a moment. They were not safe yet. The nebula was thick with dust and gas, but it was still easy for a fleet of warships to find them if they weren't careful. Zara watched. The radar, her brow furrowed. "They're following us. They'll be here soon. We need to hide deeper in the cloud." Ethan nodded and followed her instructions. He twisted the ship's controls, steering them deeper into the nebula. The dense clouds of gas swirled around, them turning the view outside the window into a swirling storm of light and color. It was disorienting. But Ethan had to trust the ship's systems and Zara's guidance as they flew deeper into the nebula. Zara kept her eyes on the radar, watching the Thraxian ships follow their path. The tension in the air was thick. Could hear the rapid beating of his own heart in his ears. This was no longer just about protecting Zara and Selenet, it was about survival. "They're getting closer," Zara said, her voice tight with worry. "If we don't shake them soon, they'll have us." Ethan gripped the controls, his mind racing for a solution. He had no experience with evading enemy fleets, but he had learned enough to know that staying in the nebula too long could be just as dangerous as being caught. Then, thought struck him. What if we make a false trail? He suggested. We could send out a decoy signal, something that looks like we've gone in a different direction. Zara's eyes lit up with hope. That could work. We could trick them into thinking we've taken a different route. Without wasting any time, Ethan set to work. He quickly programmed the ship's decoy system, sending out a false signal to mislead the Thraxians. It wasn't perfect, but it was their best chance. As they moved deeper into the nebula, signal was sent, and the Thraxian ships hesitated, unsure of which path to take. It was a brief moment of confusion, but it was enough. The fleet veered off in the wrong direction, chasing the decoy signal while Ethan and Zara took another path, slipping further into the nebula's depths. For now, they had bought themselves some time. But Ethan knew that this wouldn't be the last time the Thraxians came after them. They had only delayed the inevitable. Zara and Selen weren't just running from their past, they were running from a galaxy that would never forgive them. Ethan glanced at Zara, who was still focused on the radar. You okay? He asked quietly. Zara looked at him, her face tired but determined. For now, yes. But we must keep moving. The Thraxians won't stop. Not until they have us. Ethan nodded grimly. He had known this journey wouldn't be easy, but the weight of the situation was heavier than he had imagined. He wasn't just protecting two strangers anymore. He was protecting his friends. And he wasn't sure how much longer he could keep them safe. But one thing was clear. The fight was only beginning. The ship sailed deeper into the dense nebula, the stars outside obscured by the thick cloud of gas and dust. Inside the small spacecraft, the hum of the engines was the only sound, steady and unbroken. Ethan was at the controls, his hands moving, quickly but carefully as he steered the ship through the labyrinth of particles. His mind raced, calculating their next move. They had managed to trick the Thraxians, but the danger was far from over. Beside him, Zara and Selen sat quietly, there, eyes constantly scanning the small control screens. Zara had been quiet since their narrow escape, but Ethan knew she was thinking just as hard as he was. She had been through so much, and now she had to rely on him. They all did. Ethan glanced over at her. Her face was pale, the worry in her eyes unmistakable. She had seen what the Thraxians were capable of, and she knew the fleet wouldn't stop until they found them. Zara met his gaze. They won't give up, she said softly, her voice filled with the same fear she had when they first met. They'll track us. They're relentless. I know, Ethan replied, but we've got to keep going. We've bought ourselves some time. We'll find a way to get to safety. Zara nodded, but Ethan could see she wasn't convinced. She had seen too many people suffer at the hands of the Thraxians to believe that running was enough. Her past had been filled with pain and loss, and now fear of being caught again was all-consuming. There's a hidden place I know of, she said after a long silence. A safe zone. It's a network of planets far from the Thraxians' reach, but it's not close. It will take time, and the journey is dangerous. But it's the only place where we might be safe. Ethan turned toward her, listening carefully. What do you mean by hidden place? Zara took a deep breath, her eyes filled with a mix of determination and hesitation. It's a secret. A place where those like Mythos who escaped found refuge. It's hidden from most, even the Thraxians. But the journey will be difficult, and we'll have to pass through places no one else dares to go. Ethan considered. Her words, how do we get there? We'll have to rely on my knowledge, Zara replied, but it won't be easy. We'll need to avoid the known trade routes, stay off the scanners, and be prepared to fight if we're discovered. Even then, we'll be taking a risk, but it's our best shot. Ethan didn't hesitate. He had promised Zara and Selen that he would protect them, and if this was their best chance at survival, then it was his too. He turned back to the controls, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. All right, Ethan said, let's do it. Journey would be long and dangerous, but they had no other choice. As the ship began to move in the direction Zara had indicated, Ethan could see the worry in her eyes slowly fade, replaced by a quiet sense of resolve. She was no longer the frightened girl he had met days ago. She had become someone stronger, someone ready to fight for her freedom. Zara turned to Selen, who had been silent throughout the conversation. Mom, we're going to be all right, she said with a reassuring smile. We'll make it, Selen nodded, but her eyes were filled with sorrow. "I hope so, dear. I really do." The days passed, and the ship moved steadily through the stars, avoiding any major space lanes and keeping a low profile. Ethan relied on Zara's knowledge, trusting her instincts as they navigated through hidden pockets of space. They avoided patrols, stayed out of sight, and kept their communication silent. It was a dangerous game, and every move felt like a gamble, but it was the only chance they had. Zara proved to be an incredible guide. She had a natural understanding of the star maps and knew how to avoid detection. Her time spent as part of the Malian Empire's upper ranks had taught her many things: tactics, survival, and how to read the galaxy's undercurrents. It was knowledge she hadn't thought she would ever use again, but now it was keeping them alive. One night, as they rested in the quiet of the ship, Ethan found himself speaking to Zara. More out of curiosity than necessity? "Zara," he began, his voice soft, "you've been through so much. How do you keep going?" Zara looked up at him, her eyes tired but steady. She'd been quiet for most of the day, and Ethan wasn't sure if it was exhaustion or something deeper. "I keep going because I have to," she said after a moment. "There's no other choice. We don't get to give up. Not when we've come this far. The Thraxians. They took everything from us. But they didn't take our will to fight. They didn't take our hope." Ethan nodded, understanding what she meant. He had never been in a situation like hers, but he had seen enough of the galaxy's darkness to know how precious hope was. It was the one thing that kept people going when everything else seemed lost. "You're stronger than you realize," Ethan said quietly. "Both of you." Zara looked away, her expression unreadable. "Maybe," she said, "but strength isn't always enough. Sometimes we need more than just strength. We need allies." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "You're not alone. I'm here with you, and I'll keep you safe." Zara's gaze softened, a flicker of gratitude in her eyes. "Thank you, Ethan. I don't know what we would have done without you." The days turned into weeks. The journey grew more difficult. The farther they traveled, the more they had to be cautious. The Thraxians weren't the only threat in this part of the galaxy. Pirates, rogue factions, and uncharted space anomalies posed constant danger. But Ethan, Zara, and Selen kept pushing forward, determined to reach the hidden place Zara had mentioned. One evening, as they passed through a particularly dangerous sector of space, the ship's systems suddenly began to malfunction. The lights flickered and the engines sputtered. Ethan rushed to the controls, his hands working frantically to diagnose the problem. "Zara, what's happening?" Ethan asked, his voice tense. Zara's face paled as she looked at the control panels. "It's the electromagnetic fields in this area. It's disrupting our systems." Ethan cursed under his breath. "We can't afford a breakdown here. Be sitting ducks." Zara grabbed the console next to him, her hands moving with practiced precision. "I know a way to stabilize it. Give me a minute." Ethan watched as Zara worked, her face set in concentration. Despite everything they had been through, there was something in hers, something fierce and determined, that made him believe they could make it. He was no longer just helping strangers. He was part of something bigger. He was part of the fight for survival. As Zara fixed the ship's systems, Ethan's mind raced with thoughts of what lay ahead. There was no turning back. Now, they were all in this together. No matter what it took, they would find a way to survive. The journey was becoming harder with each passing day. Ethan had expected it, but the reality of it hit harder than he thought it would. The ship's supplies were running low, and their progress through the galaxy was slow. Zara and Selen had been quietly helping with what they could, but even their best efforts couldn't keep up with the constant challenges they faced. It felt like every obstacle in space was somehow against them. Still, they pressed on. Ethan sat in the cockpit, his eyes fixed on the stars outside. The nebula that had once shielded them from the Thraxian fleet was far behind now. They had made it through the most dangerous part of their journey. Zara's knowledge of hidden paths and safe zones had proven invaluable, but the path ahead was still uncertain. Behind him, Zara was working in the small kitchen area, preparing a meal. She had started cooking more often, almost as if it gave her some purpose. Her movements were careful and methodical, as if the act of making food was a way for her to control something in a world where everything seemed beyond her reach. Ethan noticed the way she moved, graceful, almost like she was back in the palace kitchens of her homeworld before everything had fallen apart. Selen, on the other hand, was curled up in a chair, staring out at the stars. She had grown quieter in recent days, perhaps tired of the constant uncertainty. Ethan could see the weight of everything on her shoulders. Zara had spoken of the life she and her mother once had, but Ethan didn't fully understand what it had been like for them. It wasn't just about surviving the Thraxian Zit. It was about losing everything they had known and loved. "We'll make it," Ethan said, breaking the silence. "We're getting close to the hidden place, right?" Zara looked up from her cooking and nodded. "Yes, we're close. It's just ahead in the Xylan sector. But there's still danger. The Thraxians will be looking for us. We can't let our guard down." Ethan didn't need to be reminded. The Thraxian fleet might have been fooled once, but they wouldn't give up easily. Zara's words echoed in his mind. They never stop hunting. He couldn't let that be the truth for them. He had to keep them safe. He had to. "I'll stay on high alert," he said, his voice determined. "We'll make it." Zara smiled, but it was a tired, weary smile. "Thank you, Ethan. I don't know how to repay you for this. We've been running for so long, I thought we'd never find safety again. But now I believe we might." It was a small victory. But in the middle of this dark, endless journey, it was enough to keep hope alive. The next few days were tense, filled with silence and small, careful movements. As they entered the Xylan sector, Zara's attention was sharp, her eyes constantly scanning the star charts and the ship's sensors. The sector was known for its rough space terrain, asteroid fields, scattered debris, and dangerous space storms. It was a place few dared to travel, but Zara knew the way. She had once helped guide ships through these dangerous stretches of space, though she hadn't done so in years. She spoke with authority, guiding Ethan to navigate through the obstacles. Every turn, every twist of the ship was a careful calculation. There was no room for error. "We're almost there," Zara said, her voice steady, but there was an edge of excitement in it. "Just a few more light years, and we'll reach the hidden zone. We'll be safe." Ethan couldn't help but feel a sense of relief. They had come so far, and it seemed like they might finally have a chance to rest. But even as he thought it, he knew the threat wasn't over. The Thraxians were out there, and they wouldn't stop until they had Zara and Selen back in there. Control, as they neared the hidden place, the ship's sensors suddenly flared. A warning light blinked red, and a loud beeping sound filled the cockpit. Ethan's heart skipped a beat. "What is it?" Zara's eyes flicked to the console. Her face paled. "Thraxian ships. They've found us." Ethan's hand shot to the controls, but Zara stopped him. "Don't engage them. We need to hide now. You can't fight them head on." Ethan took a deep breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. They had to be smart. They had no choice but to find cover, and fast. Zara tapped a series of buttons on the control panel, bringing up a map of nearby space. "There's a small moon nearby. It's not on any charts, so the Thraxians won't know about it. We can hide there." Ethan didn't hesitate. "Take us there. Fast." The ship swerved suddenly, darting toward the moon at full speed. The Thraxian ships, large and powerful, were closing in behind them, their dark silhouettes against the stars like a menacing shadow. As the ship veered into the moon's orbit, the sensors went silent. The Thraxians had followed them, but didn't. No, they had entered the hidden moon's shadow. The small, rocky moon offered just enough cover to conceal the ship. Ethan let out a breath he didn't realize he had been holding. "We did it. We're safe for now." Zara's face was tight, her hand resting on the edge of the control panel. "For now," she agreed. "But it's not over. The Thraxians will search for us. Can't stay here long." Ethan nodded, his mind racing with plans. He knew the hidden place was close. They just had to hold on a little longer. But as the ship drifted on the edge of the moon's shadow, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The closer they got to safety, the more the danger seemed to grow. "You've done well," he said quietly, turning to Zara. "You've kept us alive, even when things seemed impossible. Zara met his gaze, her eyes reflecting the uncertainty she had carried for so long. I'm not sure how much longer we can keep running. Ethan reached out and placed a hand on her shoulder. We'll find a way. We'll keep fighting. Together. For the first time in a long while, Zara allowed herself to believe in that promise. In that quiet moment, despite the danger, despite the uncertainty, they had something more important than just survival. They had each other. The quiet on the ship felt almost unreal after the days of constant danger. Ethan, Zara, and Selin had spent the last few hours hiding on the small moon, hidden in its shadow, away from the Thraxian fleet. But as the days passed, the weight of what they had escaped began to sink in. They had made it this far, but the Thraxians would never stop searching for them. It was only a matter of time before they found their hiding place. Zara had been quiet for most of the time. She sat at the ship's controls, staring out into the deep space, her mind clearly on what they had left behind. The pain of losing her empire, her people, still haunted her every thought. Even in the safety of the ship, it was hard for her to truly believe that they were free. But as the hours stretched on, Zara began to make a decision that would change everything. We can't keep running forever, Zara said suddenly, her voice breaking the silence. It's not enough to hide. We need to fight back. Ethan turned toward her, surprised by the sudden change in her tone. What do you mean, fight back? Zara stood up and walked over to the window. Her hand rested against the cool glass as she gazed out at the stars. I've seen enough. The Thraxians. They've destroyed everything. They've taken everything from us. And now they're after us. We can't just keep hiding, hoping they'll go away. If we want to live, we need to take the fight to them. Ethan's heart raced. You want to fight the Thraxians? You're talking about going up against an entire fleet? I don't have the resources for that. Zara turned to him, her eyes filled with a quiet, burning resolve. We don't need a fleet. We need people. We need a rebellion. A rebellion? Ethan asked, his voice uncertain. Where would we even find people to help? And how would we even start? Zara smiled faintly, her eyes filled with the memories of her people. There are others out there, others who have been oppressed by the Thraxians. Others who have seen their worlds fall, their families destroyed. I may have been a part of the Empire, but I still know who I can turn to. We don't need to fight alone. We can gather allies. We can start something bigger. Ethan stood, his mind racing with the possibilities. It was a risk, an enormous risk. But what other choice did they have? They could hide for a while, but it wouldn't be long before the Thraxians found them again. The only way to truly stop them was to fight back. You're right, Ethan said after a moment, his voice firm. We can't hide forever. We need to take action. Let's do it. Zara's eyes brightened, a spark of hope lighting her face for the first time in days. We start by reaching out. We contact the others. I have connections. I know people who can help. Together, we can form a resistance. For the next few days, the ship became a headquarters for their small but growing rebellion. Zara began to tap into the network of former allies and those who had escaped the Thraxians' control. She sent out messages, carefully encrypted, to those who might still be willing to fight. It wasn't easy. Many had lost everything and were afraid to act. But Zara's words resonated with them, just as they had with Ethan. As they waited for responses, Ethan worked on securing their supplies. They couldn't afford to be caught off guard. He checked the ship's systems, made sure everything was in order, and prepared for the day when they would need to move quickly. Finally, after several tense days, messages began to arrive. At first, they were cautious replies, small, hesitant steps toward rebellion. But as more people began to join in, Zara's confidence grew. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were beginning to form a new future, were creating a movement. One evening, as the last of the messages came through, Zara turned to Ethan. Her eyes filled with a mix of excitement and fear. We've done it, she said. We have a team. We have a plan. Ethan leaned forward, his heart pounding in his chest. What's the plan? Zara's voice was steady, her resolve clear. First, we take down the Thraxian communications. We cut off their ability to track us. Then we hit their supply lines. We cripple their ability to wage war. After that, we'll go after their fleet. We'll make them pay for what they've done. Ethan nodded, understanding the weight of what she was saying. It's dangerous. We're going up against an entire empire. But if anyone can do it, it's us. Zara smiled, the spark of hope now aflame burning brightly in her eyes. We won't do it alone. We have allies now. We have strength. The next few weeks were a blur of preparation. Zara and Ethan worked together to gather supplies, build a plan, and ensure their ship was ready for the fight ahead. Rebellion was growing, with more and more people willing to join their cause. And with each new ally, the odds seemed to shift ever so slightly in their favor. Selin, who had been silent and quiet for so long, began to find purpose in their mission as well. She had seen the damage the Thraxians had done to her people, and now she was ready to help in any way she could. She worked alongside Zara, using her own skills to build connections and find resources. There were still days filled with doubt, moments when they wondered if they were in over their heads. The Thraxians were powerful and they had the resources to crush any rebellion. But Zara's strength and Ethan's determination kept the group moving forward. Every small victory, every new ally, was a step closer to their goal. Finally, after weeks of preparation, they were ready. The plan was set in motion. They would attack the Thraxian communication stations, disrupt their supply lines, and strike at the heart of their empire. The first mission was the most dangerous, but it was also the most important. If they could cut off the Thraxians' ability to communicate, they would have a chance. Zara stood beside Ethan, her face set in determination. "This is it," she said, her voice steady. "We fight for our freedom. We fight for those who have suffered. We fight for everything we've lost." Ethan nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. "Together," he said, "we do this together." And with that, they set off on the mission that would change everything.